In this video, I want to review the order of operations simply using numbers. So all I have here is an expression, and a lot of you have probably heard of PEMDAS, but I want to give you GEMDAS. And the reason I use GEMDAS is because I want you to think of the G as grouping. So we're going to look at our grouping first. So when I'm when I'm simplifying expressions, I'm always doing GEMDAS from left to right. So this means I'm going to simplify. And the reason I'm stressing this is because we will also use GEMDAS for solving equations, but we do it a different way. So we need to understand how to use it when we're simplifying so that we can understand how to use it when we're solving. So the first thing I come to is grouping. And so I'm looking here at this problem and I'm asking myself, is anything being grouped? So do I have any grouping going on? And certainly I do. It may not be obvious, but I do have this long bar here, which is my division sign. And what essentially that's doing is it's grouping my numerator in one area and my denominator in the other. So that's why sometimes when we put this in the calculator, if we don't use our parentheses correctly, the calculator doesn't do the order of operations correctly. So I do have grouping. So I have to do what's inside the grouping first. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's look at the grouping at the top. So when I look in my numerator, notice the first thing I do is I write my fraction bar. That way I can keep track of my numerator and my denominator and not get lost. So the first grouping I see is in my numerator, which is 7 times 8, which is 56. So I can just write that like this. Now, when I look down here in my denominator in that grouping, I have subtraction, addition, a square root. I have a lot going on in there. So it looks like I'm going to have to look a little bit more closely in my denominator. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put my grouping, which in this case happens to be my parentheses. So I'm looking inside my grouping, and the first thing I come to within my grouping, I'm going to ask myself, do I have any exponents? Are there any exponents in my grouping? And the answer is yes. My square root of 9, that is an exponent. And I know that I'm jumping ahead, but in Algebra 2, you will see that the square root of 9 can be written as 9 to the 1/2 power. So those are the same way of saying the same thing. They're two different ways of saying the same thing. So the square root of 9 is an exponent, which means I have to do this first. I'm not going to write it first. I'm going to copy everything in order until I get to that, and then I will take the square root of 9. So the first thing I see is 4, then I see a minus 8, and then I have a plus the square root of 9. Well, the square root of 9 is 3. So now I no longer have a square root. I no longer have an exponent. I've done that. So I'm still working within the grouping. So within the grouping, so I'm going to just put a hyphen there to know that this is within the grouping. I'm going to ask myself, is anything being multiplied or divided? And the answer is no. Nothing is being multiplied or divided in that group. So then the next thing I'm going to ask myself, is anything being added or subtracted? And the answer is yes. We either have addition or subtraction going on. So because these have pretty much equal significance, we're going to do this from left to right in the order in which it happens. Okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write down my numerator. I'm going to write down my division sign. And I'm going to go ahead and simplify my denominator. So 4 minus 8 is negative 4, and then I have a plus 3. I'm still involved in adding and subtracting. So I'm going to write down my 56. I'm going to write down my division line. Negative 4 plus 3 is negative 1. Okay, so now I have just a simple group, something on the top and something on the bottom. I only have one grouping right here, which is my division line. But because there's no math happening up at the top, that's just a number, and there's no math happening in the bottom, that's just a number, I don't have to worry about grouping anymore. I can look at this as simply division. So that means I have 56 divided by negative 1, which gives me negative 56. So a couple things I want to point out to you is, notice how I'm very systematic in working down. I'm not crowding my space. I'm going back and I'm using my order of operations very systematically, asking myself questions. I'm doing one thing at a time. There's no equal sign, so I do not write an equal sign. So this is how you need to be organizing your work in order to be clear in what you're doing. So again, when we are simplifying, we're doing GEMDAS from left to right, very orderly, very systematically. In the next video, I'm going to show you how to use GEMDAS to solve equations.